A man was dragged through the rain, blood spreading across his torn shirt like a crimson flower. Behind him, a small boy cried out, his voice breaking with desperation. "Father!" The rain fell harder, washing blood into the mud, as rough hands pulled the man toward a wooden platform, where others waited with chains and ledgers. Josephine Hartwell woke with a wham, her hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly. Sweat dampened her nightgown despite the autumn chill that crept through the cabin's poorly sealed windows. It was the third time this week she dreamed of the man in the rain and the desperate child. Each time the dream felt more urgent, more real. In the pale moonlight filtering through thin curtains, Josie's gaze fell on Thomas's photograph beside her bed. Her husband's kind eyes seemed to watch her, even from the sepia-toned image taken just months before consumption claimed him. "You're calling me to them again, aren't you?" she whispered, touching the frame with trembling fingers. 6 months a widow, 6 months with child, and here she was in a ramshackle cabin on the outskirts of Millbrook, Missouri, far from the St. Louis society that had turned its back on her after Thomas's controversial teachings about educating freed slaves' children. Far from everything familiar except the growing life inside her that kept her tethered to this world. Josie lit the small oil lamp beside her bed and reached for Thomas's Bible. The leather was worn smooth from his hands, the pages marked with his careful notes. She let the book fall open where it would, finding herself at Isaiah 61, the verse Thomas had underlined heavily. "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives." Mom, she traced the words with her fingertip, remembering how Thomas would recite this passage when they dreamed of building their school on the frontier. "The captives," he would say, "aren't just those in physical chains, Josie. Sometimes the most binding chains are injustice, ignorance, and fear." The baby kicked strong and insistent, as if agreeing with its father's memory. Dawn was still hours away. Josie moved to the cabin's single window, kneeling awkwardly with her pregnant body on the rough wooden floor. Outside, the waning moon cast silver light over the small garden she'd managed to coax from the stubborn soil. In the distance, the sleeping town of Millbrook lay quiet, unaware of her vigil. "Thomas," she prayed softly, "if this dream is your way of guiding me, help me understand. Who is this man in the rain? Why does his son's cry pierce my heart? What would you have me do?" As if in answer, the baby kicked again, harder this time, and Josie felt a clarity she hadn't experienced since Thomas's death. Tomorrow was the monthly labor auction in Millbrook, where debtors were sold like cattle to pay what they owed. Something told her no. Everything told her she needed to be there. Millbrook's town square had transformed for auction day. The usual quiet gave way to a restless energy as townsfolk gathered around the wooden platform erected before the courthouse steps. Men in worn clothing stood in line, eyes downcast, while those with money to spend evaluated them like livestock. Josie pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling conspicuous as one of the few women present. The $5 in her pocket, the last of her savings, seemed to burn against her thigh. She wasn't sure why she'd brought the money or what she was doing here at all except following the persistent pull of her dreams. "Quite the spectacle, isn't it, Mrs. Hartwell?" Dr. Benjamin Clemens appeared beside her, his medical bag in hand. The elderly physician had been kind to her since her arrival in Millbrook, checking on her pregnancy without charging fees she couldn't afford. "It seems a cruel custom," Josie replied, watching as a young man was sold to the blacksmith for 3 months of labor to cover a debt of $20. Dr. Clemens's face darkened. "Cruel indeed, though some would call it justice. Speaking of justice," his voice lowered, "I see Silas Hutchkins is here today." Josie followed his gaze to a well-dressed man standing near the front of the crowd. Though she'd never met him, she recognized Millbrook's bank owner from descriptions, tall and imposing with cold eyes that seemed to calculate profit from others' misfortunes. "Does he often attend these auctions?" she asked. "Only when someone interesting is being sold," Dr. Clemens replied cryptically. "Ah, I believe our next lot is approaching." The crowd parted as two figures were led to the platform, a man and a small boy. The man's face was bruised, his shirt torn and stained with what looked horribly like dried blood. Despite his battered appearance, he walked with a stubborn dignity, one hand protectively guiding the child beside him. Josie's heart stuttered in her chest. The man from her dreams. Next up, Colt Maddox and Son, wow, announced the auctioneer. Former ranch owner, strong back, good with animals. Defaulted on his bank loan after 2 seasons of drought. Starting bid is $50 for 6 months labor child included. Colt Maddox stood stoically staring at some point above the crowd's heads, refusing to meet the evaluating gazes. Beside him, the boy no more than 7 or 8 clutched something to his chest. A small wooden horse, Josie realized, carved with a careful detail. "Who is he?" Josie whispered to Dr. Clemens. Colt Maddox. Had one of the finest cattle ranches in the county until his wife died last year. Consumption like your husband. Left him with the boy Noah, I believe, in a mountain of debt. Hutchkins foreclosed on his property 3 months ago. As if hearing his name, Hutchkins stepped forward, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'll start the bidding at $20, he called, his voice carrying across the square. "I could use a man to muck out my stables." Laughter rippled through the crowd. It was a deliberate insult offering a former landowner such menial work at less than half the starting price. Something fierce and protective ignited in Josie's chest. Without conscious thought, her hand rose into the air. $5, she called, her voice stronger than she expected. The crowd fell silent, turning to stare at the pregnant widow standing alone at the edge of the square. The auctioneer blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, the starting bid is $55 for their freedom," Josie clarified, meeting Colt Maddox's gaze directly for the first time. His eyes widened, slightly blue eyes. She noticed the color of a summer sky, now clouded with confusion and wariness. Hutchkins laughed, the sound like ice cracking. "Mrs. Hartwell, isn't it? The school teacher from St. Louis. This isn't a charity auction. These men have debts to society." $5, Josie repeated, holding out the money. "It's all I have. But unlike you, Mr. Hutchkins, I don't intend to own them. I intend to free them." A murmur ran through the crowd. The auctioneer looked uncertainly between Josie and Hutchkins, clearly torn between protocol and the growing tension. On the platform, the boy Noah finally looked directly at Josie. His eyes, so like his father's, but filled with a child's innocent hope, seemed to pierce straight through her. He whispered something to the wooden horse in his hands, then nudged his father. Colt Maddox looked down at his son, then back at Josie, his expression unreadable. Hutchkins stepped closer to Josie, lowering his voice. "You're making a spectacle of yourself, Mrs. Hartwell. A woman in your condition alone, with no means of support, do you really want to draw such attention?" The threat was veiled but unmistakable. Josie lifted her chin. "I believe this is a public auction, Mr. Hutchkins. Anyone may bid as they see fit." For a moment, the banker's composure slipped, revealing something ugly beneath. Then he smiled tightly and stepped back. "By all means, then. $5 for the famous Colt Maddox and his mute son. Going once." No one else bid. Whether out of respect for Josie's gesture or simple disinterest, the crowd remained silent. Going twice, sold to Mrs. Hartwell for $5. As the auctioneer took her money, the last of her savings, Josie felt a strange sense of rightness mingled with terror. What had she done? How would she feed 2 more mouths when she barely managed to feed herself? Yet when Colt and Noah were brought down from the platform, and the boy looked up at her with the first flicker of hope she'd seen in his eyes, Josie knew she'd do it all again without hesitation. "Ma'am," Colt Maddox said, his voice rough, as if rarely used, "I don't know what your intentions are, but I thank you for the kindness you have shown to my boy." Up close, she could see the signs of recent beating, the split lip, the bruise darkening his left cheekbone, the careful way he held himself to protect injured ribs. Someone had made an example of him. "I have a small cabin with a barn," Josie said simply. "It's not much, but you're welcome to stay until you find your feet again." Noah tugged at his father's sleeve, still clutching the wooden horse. When Colt bent down, the boy whispered something in his ear. "My son wants to know if you're an angel," Colt translated, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. Josie smiled, touching her rounded belly. "Just someone who knows what it's like to lose everything." As they left the town square, she felt Hutchkins's cold gaze following them. Whatever she'd done today had made an enemy one with far more power and influence than a pregnant widow could safely challenge. Yet the weight of Thomas's Bible in her pocket reminded her that sometimes the greatest acts of faith began with the smallest gestures of defiance. The walk to Josie's cabin took nearly an hour, made longer by Colt's injuries and her own awkward gait. Noah walked between them occasionally, whispering to his wooden horse but never speaking directly to either adult. The autumn afternoon was drawing to a close when they finally reached the small clearing where Josie's cabin stood. "It's not much," she said apologetically, watching Colt take in the sagging porch, the patched roof, the small garden plot where late vegetables struggled against the approaching frost. "It's a roof and walls," Colt replied simply. "We've had less these past weeks." Noah broke away from them, approaching the cabin with cautious curiosity. He paused at a wild rosebush beside the steps, touching a late-blooming flower with gentle fingers. "He remembers his mother's roses," Colt explained softly. "Sarah planted a garden like yours, though she had a way with flowers I never understood." "Oh, the barn is small but dry," Josie said, pointing to the weathered structure at the edge of the clearing. "There's clean straw for bedding. I have some of my husband's clothes that might fit you." She led them inside the cabin, one main room with a small sleeping alcove partitioned by a faded curtain. A cast-iron stove provided heat and cooking space with a table and two chairs beside the single window. Books were stacked everywhere on shelves on the floor under the bed. "You're a reader," Colt observed, his tone suggesting approval. "Thomas, my husband, was studying law before he died. I kept his books. I'm not sure why." Josie moved to the stove, stoking the banked coals. "You must be hungry. I don't have much, but there's bean soup and cornbread from yesterday." While she prepared the simple meal, Colt helped Noah settle at the table, murmuring quiet reassurances. The boy set his wooden horse beside his plate, positioning it carefully so it seemed to watch over him. "Your son's horse is beautifully made," Josie commented, serving the soup. "Sarah carved it for him," Colt said. "She had a gift for seeing what was hidden in a piece of wood." They ate in silence for a while, the weight of recent events settling around them. Noah ate hungrily but neatly, occasionally breaking off bits of cornbread to place between his wooden horse as if feeding it too. "Why did you do it?" Colt asked abruptly, setting down his borrowed spoon. "Buy our contracts. You don't know us. You can't afford it." The directness of the question didn't offend Josie. After months of solitude, there was something refreshing about simple honesty. "I dreamed about you," she admitted, then flushed at how it sounded. "Both of you, I mean. For 3 nights. I saw you in the rain being dragged somewhere. I heard Noah calling for you." Colt's expression shifted from skepticism to confusion. "That was 2 days ago. Hutchkins' men came for us at dawn. It was raining." "I can't explain it," Josie said. "Thomas always said there were more things in heaven and earth than we could understand. Perhaps he's still watching over me, guiding me." Noah looked up, suddenly his gaze intense. He whispered something to his horse, then pushed it a few inches toward Josie. "He wants you to hold it," Colt translated, surprise evident in his voice. "He doesn't let anyone touch it usually." Josie carefully picked up the wooden horse. It was smooth from countless hours of handling, the craftsmanship remarkable in its detail. As she turned it over, she felt a strange sense of connection to Noah, to the mother who had carved it, to something larger than herself. "Thank you, Noah," she said, meeting the boy's eyes. "It's beautiful." Noah nodded solemnly, then reached out hesitantly toward Josie's rounded belly. He looked at her questioningly. "Yes, you may," Josie said, understanding his silent request. When Noah's small hand rested on her belly, the baby kicked strongly as if in greeting. Noah's eyes widened, and for the first time, Josie saw a smile flicker across his face. "Strong baby," he whispered so softly she almost missed it. The simple moment of connection brought unexpected tears to Josie's eyes. After months of loneliness, of carrying her grief and her child with no one to share either burden, the gentle touch of a child's hand felt like a benediction. That night, after Colt and Noah settled in the barn, Josie sat by her window watching the stars emerge. The recklessness of what she'd done still frightened her. Yet beneath the fear ran a current of purpose she hadn't felt since Thomas died. "If you sent them to me," she whispered to the night sky, "help me understand why. Help me be what they need." The next morning, Josie woke to the unfamiliar sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Colt on her roof, methodically replacing broken shingles. Noah sat in the garden, carefully weeding around the late cabbages, the wooden horse watching from a nearby stone. "You don't need to do that," Josie called up to Colt. He paused, wiping sweat from his brow despite the morning chill. "Roof won't fix itself before winter," he replied simply. "Found the tools in your barn." "Thomas was always meaning to repair it," Josie said, feeling a pang at the memory of her husband's unfulfilled plans. He wasn't particularly handy with tools. School teacher, you said? Yes, we both were. We had dreams of building a school out here on the frontier, a place where any child could learn regardless of circumstances. She touched her belly. This little one changed our plans, and then Thomas got sick. Noah appeared at her side, silently offering a small bouquet of the last wildflowers from the edge of the garden. The simple kindness brought fresh tears to Josie's eyes. Thank you, Noah, she said, accepting the flowers. They're beautiful. The boy nodded, then returned to his weeding, pausing occasionally to whisper to his wooden horse. He doesn't speak much, Colt said, climbing down from the roof. Not since Sarah died. The horse is the only one he talks to regularly. Grief affects us all differently, Josie replied. After Thomas died, I couldn't stop talking to him, to God, to myself, as if words could somehow fill the empty space. Colt's eyes softened with understanding. Sarah took her words with her. The house got so quiet afterward. Sometimes I'd talk just to hear a human voice, even if it was only my own. The shared experience of loss created a bridge between them, tentative but real. Josie found herself telling Colt about Thomas, about their dreams for the school, about the hostility they'd faced in St. Louis when they'd advocated for educating freed slaves' children alongside whites. That's why we came west, she explained, as they shared a simple lunch of apples and bread. Thomas believed the frontier needed teachers even more than the city did. We had just enough saved to buy land for the school when life had other plans, Colt finished for her. Noah, who had been sitting quietly with his wooden horse, suddenly looked up at the road leading to the cabin. His expression changed from contentment to alarm. Someone's coming, Colt said, following his son's gaze. A rider. Josie felt a flutter of anxiety as she recognized the approaching horseman. It's Hutchkins. Colt immediately moved to stand between Josie and the road, his posture protective despite his still healing injuries. Noah slipped behind his father, clutching his wooden horse tightly. Silas Hutchkins rode into the clearing on a gleaming black stallion that probably cost more than Josie's entire cabin. He was immaculately dressed in a tailored suit and polished boots, every inch the successful businessman. Only his eyes betrayed something colder, more calculating. Mrs. Hartwell, he called, tipping his hat with exaggerated courtesy. I thought I should check on you after yesterday's impulsive purchase. Mr. Hutchkins, Josie acknowledged, stepping forward to stand beside Colt. As you can see, we're managing quite well. Hutchkins dismounted, his gaze sweeping critically over the small homestead. Indeed, I see Maddox is already making himself useful. Quite the handyman, aren't you, Maddox? Though your skills clearly didn't extend to managing your finances. Colt's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. I've come to make you an offer, Mrs. Hartwell. Hutchkins continued smoothly. I realize you acted out of Christian charity yesterday, but practicality must eventually assert itself. You're a woman alone with child living on the edge of poverty. Taking on 2 more mouths to feed is simply unsustainable. What offer? Josie asked, though she suspected she already knew. I'll buy their contracts from you, $50 10 times what you paid. A generous profit for a day's investment. The amount was substantial enough to see Josie through the winter months and possibly until after the baby was born. The practical part of her recognized the sense in it, but then she felt Noah press against her skirts, his small body trembling slightly. The wooden horse in his hands seemed to watch her, waiting for her decision. That's very generous, Mr. Hutchkins, Josie said carefully, but I'm afraid I must decline. Mr. Maddox and his son are not for sale. Something dangerous flashed in Hutchkins' eyes before his smooth facade returned. Mrs. Hartwell, where I come from, a charity is commendable, but foolishness is not. A woman in your condition should be focused on practical matters. Where I come from, Mr. Hutchkins, Josie replied, drawing on a strength she hadn't known she possessed. We were taught that faith, hope, and love will conquer all. What do you believe in? The directness of her question caught him off guard. For a moment, the mask slipped again, revealing something ugly beneath the polished exterior. I believe in the natural order of things, Mrs. Hartwell. Those who work hard and make wise decisions prosper. Those who don't. He gestured dismissively toward Colt. Well, they end up where they deserve to be. Is that what happened to Judge Franklin? Noah's small voice was so unexpected that all 3 adults turned to stare at him. Did he deserve what happened to him? Hutchkins's face drained of color. What did you say, boy? Noah shrank back against Josie, clearly regretting having spoken. Colt moved protectively closer to his son. Children and their imaginations, Hutchkins said after a moment, his composure returning, though his eyes remained cold. I said, well, I've made my offer. Should you reconsider, you know where to find me. He mounted his horse, then paused, looking down at them. A word of advice, Mrs. Hartwell. Millbrook is a small town with a long memory. Associating with certain people can make life difficult for newcomers, especially those in vulnerable circumstances. With that parting threat, he rode away, leaving an uneasy silence in his wake. Who is Judge Franklin? Josie asked once Hutchkins was out of sight. Circuit judge who died last year. Colt replied, his expression troubled. They said it was an accident. His horse spooked, threw him into a ravine. But Noah's never mentioned him before. He knelt before his son. Noah, why did you ask Mr. Hutchkins about the judge? Noah clutched his wooden horse tighter, shaking his head. It's all right, Josie said gently. You're safe here. The boy looked up at her, his eyes filled with a knowledge too heavy for his years. Horse told me, he whispered. Mama says the bad man hurt the judge. Colt and Josie exchanged concerned glances. Was this simply a child's fantasy born of trauma, or something more? Noah. Colt said carefully, when does Mama talk to you? Through horse, Noah replied as if it were obvious. She carved her voice into him. She says we need to help the baby lady. She says the bad man will try to hurt her too. A chill ran down Josie's spine that had nothing to do with the autumn air. She'd attributed her dreams to Thomas's guidance, but what if Sarah Maddox was also reaching across the veil, trying to protect those left behind? I think, Josie said slowly, we all need to be very careful from now on. That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep in the barn's loft, Colt helped Josie clean up after their simple dinner. The encounter with Hutchkins had left them both unsettled, creating a new wariness that tempered their growing ease with each other. I should leave, Colt said abruptly, setting down the plate he was drying. Take Noah and move on. Hutchkins won't stop at threats, and you're already in a vulnerable position. And go where? Josie asked. With what resources? Winter's coming, and you're still healing. I've faced worse odds, Colt insisted, though the shadows under his eyes betrayed his exhaustion. I won't bring danger to your door after you've shown us such kindness. Josie crossed to her sleeping alcove and returned with Thomas's Bible. Did you ever read this? She asked, opening to a marked page. I'm familiar with the good book, though I'll admit my faith has been tested these past years. Isaiah 41:10. Josie read, Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. She looked up at Colt. Thomas believed that God rarely calls us to safe paths, but always promises to walk beside us through the dangerous ones. With respect to your husband's faith, Mrs. Hartwell. Josie, she corrected, if we're going to face danger together, then we should at least use each other's names. A reluctant smile touched Colt's lips. Josie, then, my point remains. Hutchkins is powerful in this town. He owns the bank, has the sheriff in his pocket, and isn't above using violence to get what he wants. He gestured to his still healing face. This wasn't the first beating his men gave me, just the most public. All the more reason not to face him alone, Josie argued. There's strength in numbers, even small ones. Colt studied her with new respect. You're not what I expected, Josie Hartwell. And what did you expect? A soft city woman playing at frontier life. Someone who'd crumble at the first real hardship. Josie laughed, the sound surprising both of them. I may have come from the city Colt Maddox, but there was nothing soft about teaching in St. Louis. I've faced down angry parents' school boards and mobs protesting Thomas's ideas about education. This isn't my first battle, just a new battleground. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door, unusual at this hour, especially given the cabin's isolated location. Colt immediately tensed, moving to position himself between Josie and the door. Who's there? He called. Dr. Clemens, came the reply. I've brought some things for Mrs. Hartwell. Josie nodded and Colt opened the door to reveal the elderly physician, his arms full of packages. Doctor, this is unexpected, Josie said, ushering him inside. Forgive the late hour, Dr. Clemens replied, setting his burdens on the table. I thought it best to come after dark. Fewer curious eyes. The packages contained food-cured ham, cheese, fresh bread, and dried fruit, along with warm blankets and a small bottle of medicine. For your cough, the doctor explained, handing Josie the bottle. The damp weather isn't good for your condition. This is very generous, Josie said, touched by his kindness. But I can't possibly pay. Consider it payment for future services. Dr. Clemens interrupted. I'm not getting any younger, and this county needs a school teacher far more than it needs another struggling physician. His real reason for coming, however, soon became clear. I heard about Hutchins's visit today, he said, accepting a cup of tea. Word travels fast in Millbrook. He offered to buy our contracts, Josie explained. I declined. Dr. Clemens nodded gravely. I expected as much. That's why I'm here. You should know what you're facing. He turned to Colt. Maddox isn't the first rancher Hutchins has ruined. There have been at least 8 others in the past 2 years. 8, Colt looked shocked. I knew about the Washingtons and the Martinez family, but the Keens, the Olsons, the Pattersons, the Rileys, and the Blackwood sisters, Dr. Clemens enumerated. All solid, hard-working families, all suddenly unable to meet their payments after unexpected adjustments to their loans. Fraud, Colt said flatly. Yes, though proving it has been impossible. Hutchins keeps the town's only notary on his payroll, and the county records office had a mysterious fire last spring that destroyed many original documents. Josie felt a chill of recognition. The same thing happened to Colt. His loan amount was doubled, and payments he'd made weren't credited. I suspected as much, Dr. Clemens said. But there's more. Martha Keene Henry's wife has been cleaning at the bank to work off their debt. She's found evidence that Hutchins isn't just stealing land for his own enrichment. He's acquiring specific properties for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. The railroad is coming through Millbrook, Cole asked them. Not just through, they're planning a major junction and depot. The land values will increase tenfold once it's announced publicly. The implications were staggering. Hutchins wasn't just a corrupt banker, he was orchestrating a massive land grab for personal profit. But why target my ranch, Colt wondered. It's good grazing land, but it's not on any natural route for a railroad. Dr. Clemens hesitated. That's where things get even more complicated. Martha found a survey map in Hutchins's office. Your property and several others he's foreclosed on site above what appears to be a substantial gold deposit. Gold. Colt looked stunned. That's impossible. We've worked that land for generations. There's no gold. Not surface gold, the doctor clarified. Deep veins that would require industrial mining. The railroad needs the land for tracks. Hutchins's silent partners need it for mining rights. Josie felt the pieces falling into place. So Hutchins forecloses on properties, acquires them for pennies on the dollar, then sells them to the railroad and mining interests for a massive profit. Precisely, and anyone who might interfere with this plan ends up like Judge Franklin, Colt finished grimly. Dr. Clemens looked startled. How do you know about Franklin? Noah mentioned him today, Josie explained. He said something about Hutchins hurting the judge. The doctor's face paled. The boy knows. How could he possibly? He says his mother tells him things, Colt said, his voice strained, through the wooden horse she carved for him. Under normal circumstances, such a claim might have sounded like fantasy, but in the quiet cabin with night pressing against the windows, none of them were willing to dismiss it entirely. Franklin was investigating irregularities at the bank before his death, Dr. Clemens said quietly. He'd received complaints from several families about changing loan terms. The day before his accident, he requested access to Hutchins's ledgers. The implications hung in the air between them, too terrible to voice directly but impossible to ignore. What do we do now? Josie asked, breaking the heavy silence. We gather evidence, Dr. Clemens replied. Martha isn't the only one watching Hutchins. There are others in town who've lost faith in his benevolent facade, Deputy Wilson for one. The young deputy sheriff has been troubled by some of the orders he's been given. And then, Colt pressed, then we find a way to get that evidence to federal authorities beyond Hutchins' influence. The territorial governor won't help us. He's likely involved, but there are honest judges in Kansas City who would take action if presented with proof of fraud and murder. It was a daunting prospect, gathering evidence against the most powerful man in the county while avoiding his attention long enough to get that evidence to authorities. Yet what choice did they have? When you bought our contracts yesterday, Colt said to Josie, you didn't just save us from servitude. You may have stumbled into the only chance this community has to free itself from Hutchkins' grip. Dr. Clemens nodded soberly. But be careful, very careful. Hutchkins will be watching you all now. After the doctor left, Josie and Colt sat in silence, absorbing the enormity of what they'd learned. The simple act of charity that had brought them together now seemed like the first step on a much longer and more dangerous path. Still want me to stay? Colt asked finally. Josie met his gaze across the table, more than ever. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Josie was teaching Noah his letters at the kitchen table, the boy proving to be a quick study despite his reluctance to speak when a wagon appeared on the road to the cabin. It's Pete Malloy, Colt said, recognizing the driver. Works odd jobs around town, decent man. Pete pulled his wagon into the clearing, raising a hand in greeting. Morning, Maddox, Mrs. Hartwell. Got something here you might want to see. The wagon was loaded with furniture and household items, chairs, a small table, kitchen implements, and bundles of clothing wrapped in old sheets. Where did you get these? Colt asked, a strange expression crossing his face. Hutchkins had them stored in the warehouse behind the bank, Pete explained, looking uncomfortable. Told me to take what I wanted and burn the rest. Said they were cluttering up the place. Noah made a small sound and pressed against his father's side. Among the items, Josie could see a rocking chair, a sewing basket, and what looked like a child's wooden toy chest. These are Sarah's things, Colt said, his voice thick with emotion. Our personal belongings from the ranch. He had no right, these weren't part of the foreclosure. Pete shifted nervously. I know, Colt. That's why I brought them. Hutchkins was planning to burn them tomorrow. Noah broke away from his father and climbed onto the wagon, making his way unerringly to a small wooden box tucked among the larger items. He opened it and removed something wrapped in oilcloth, clutching it to his chest with obvious relief. Sarah's Bible, Colt explained, watching his son. It was her mother's before her. Noah's been asking for it since we lost the ranch. Pete reached into his coat and pulled out a leather portfolio. There's something else. When I was loading this stuff, I found these papers mixed in with Sarah's things. Thought they might be important. Colt took the portfolio with trembling hands. Inside were documents with official seals and signatures, all bearing dates from the months before Sarah's death. As he read, his expression changed from confusion to disbelief to rage. What is it? Josie asked, moving closer. My original mortgage papers, Colt said, his voice barely controlled. The real ones. Look at this. He pointed to a figure on one document. The amount I owed was less than half what Hutchkins claimed. And this, he flipped to another page, is a receipt for a payment I made right before Sarah got sick. A payment that should have brought my account current. Josie examined the papers carefully. This receipt is dated 3 weeks before the foreclosure proceedings began. If this is legitimate, then Hutchkins had no legal grounds to take your property. He forged new papers. Colt said, the words coming out like a curse. Made it look like I owed more than I did. Hid the evidence that I'd made payments. This whole thing, the auction, everything, it was fraud. Noah tugged on Josie's sleeve, offering her the oilcloth package he'd retrieved from his mother's Bible. Inside was a small journal, the pages filled with Sarah's neat handwriting. What's this, Noah? Josie asked gently. Mama's secret book, Noah whispered. She said to keep it safe until we found the angel. The angel, Josie repeated, confused. Noah nodded solemnly. You, the baby lady who would help us. Colt took the journal with reverent hands, opening to the first page. April 15, 1873, he read aloud. I am starting this record because I fear something is not right with the bank's handling of our loan. Colt is too busy with the ranch to notice the discrepancies, but the payment we made last month is not reflected in this month's statement. The journal documented Sarah's growing suspicions about Hutchkins's practices, her careful tracking of payments made versus credited, and eventually her direct confrontation with the banker. June 10, 1873. Colt continued reading, his voice growing strained. Hutchkins came to the ranch today while Colt was working the north pasture. He offered to forgive our entire debt if I would sign papers transferring the property to a corporation he represents. When I refused, he became angry, saying I should consider the consequences for Noah's future. The threat was clear, though carefully worded. The entries continued, growing more concerned as Sarah's health declined and the bank's pressure increased. The final entry, dated just days before her death, was the most chilling. I fear I will not see the truth revealed in my lifetime. My strength fails daily, and Colt is consumed with grief already. I cannot burden him further. But I have hidden this journal and the evidence I've gathered where only those who truly love me would think to look. If something happens to me, I pray someone will use this information to stop Hutchins from hurting other families as he has hurt ours. Judge Franklin has promised to review our case next month. I pray he lives to do so. The cabin fell silent except for the sound of Noah's quiet sniffling. Josie gathered the boy into her arms, feeling her own eyes fill with tears. She knew, Colt said, staring at the journal. All those months when I thought she was just resting, trying to get better, she was fighting. She was gathering evidence. She was protecting you, Josie said gently, and Noah, and all the other families who would come after you. Pete Malloy, who had been quietly watching this revelation, cleared his throat. There's talk in town. Martha Keene is organizing people, families who've been hurt by Hutchins. They're meeting at the church social on Sunday, pretending it's just fellowship, but really sharing information. We'll be there, Josie decided, looking to Colt for confirmation. He nodded, a new determination hardening his features. Sarah started this fight. We'll finish it. As Pete drove away, promising to keep their discoveries quiet, Colt knelt before his son. Noah, did Mama tell you anything else about Judge Franklin or Mr. Hutchins? Noah clutched his wooden horse tightly, his eyes serious beyond his years. She said the bad man pushed the Budge off the cliff when no one was looking. She said we have to be careful or he'll hurt us too. Colt and Josie exchanged troubled glances. If Hutchins had indeed murdered a judge to protect his schemes, how far would he go to silence 3 more witnesses? That night, after Noah was asleep, Colt showed Josie a hidden compartment in the bottom of Sarah's sewing box, a space just large enough to conceal the journal and mortgage documents. She was always clever with her hands, he said, a bittersweet smile touching his lips. Furniture, toys, hiding places. There wasn't much Sarah couldn't create if she set her mind to it. As they secured the precious evidence, their hands brushed momentarily. Josie felt a jolt of awareness that had nothing to do with their dangerous situation and everything to do with the growing connection between them. Colt must have felt it too, for he drew back slightly, his expression conflicted. I'm sorry, he said, though whether he was apologizing for the touch or his reaction to it wasn't clear. Don't be, Josie replied softly. We're both still carrying those we've lost. There's no betrayal in finding comfort in the present. Thomas was a fortunate man, Colt said after a moment, to have someone who understood him so well. As was Sarah, Josie returned, to have someone who honored her so deeply. Outside, the autumn wind whispered through the trees, carrying the first promise of winter. Inside, 2 broken people began the tentative process of discovering that sometimes the most unexpected connections grow from the deepest losses. And in the barn loft, Noah Maddox slept peacefully for the first time in months, his wooden horse tucked against his chest, its carved eyes watching over him with a mother's enduring love. Sunday morning dawned clear and crisp, with frost silvering the cabin's small garden. Josie woke early, her anticipation of the church social mingling with apprehension. Today they would take their first real step into the wider conspiracy, seeking allies among those Hutchins had wronged. She dressed carefully in her one good dress, a navy blue wool that Thomas had always loved, though it now strained across her pregnant belly. As she pinned up her hair, she studied her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. 6 months a widow, 6 months with child, and now embroiled in a dangerous fight against the most powerful man in the county. What would Thomas think of her choices? You'd tell me to be brave, she whispered to his memory, to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. A soft knock at the cabin door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Noah standing on the porch, freshly washed and wearing clean clothes from the items Pete had returned. In his hands, he held a crudely fashioned bouquet of late wildflowers and dried grasses. For church, he explained shyly, offering her the bouquet. Mama always had flowers for church. Josie's heart melted at the simple gesture. Thank you, Noah. They're beautiful. She knelt awkwardly to kiss his forehead, her rounded belly making the movement difficult. Shall we put them in water to keep them fresh? Noah nodded, following her inside. As she arranged the flowers in her one chipped vase, Colt appeared in the doorway, clean-shaven and wearing Thomas's old Sunday suit. Though the shoulders were slightly tight, the overall effect was striking. Without the beard and with his hair neatly combed, Colt looked less like a defeated rancher and more like the proud landowner he had once been. "You look," Josie began, then faltered suddenly shy. "Ridiculous," Colt finished with a self-conscious smile. "Your husband was a smaller man than me." "I was going to say distinguished," Josie corrected. "Thomas would be pleased to see his clothes put to good use." An awkward silence fell between them, laden with unspoken awareness of their situation, two widowed people forming a makeshift family under the shadow of mounting danger. "We should discuss what happens at the church," Colt said, finally breaking the tension. "If Hutchkins is there—" "We act normally," Josie replied. "We're simply a woman who charitably purchased labor contracts attending church with her workers. Nothing suspicious about that. And if Martha Keene approaches us, then we follow her lead. Dr. Clemens said she's been organizing the other families. She'll know how to make contact without drawing attention." Noah, who had been listening intently to this exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Mama says we need to watch for the lady with the medicine bag." Josie and Colt exchanged startled glances. "Medicine bag?" Colt asked gently. "What does Mama mean by that, son?" "The lady who helps sick people. She has a special bag with herbs. Mama says she knows things." Martha was a nurse during the war, Josie remembered Dr. Clemens mentioning. "Perhaps she still carries medical supplies." Colt knelt to Noah's level. "Did Mama tell you anything else about today? Anything we should be careful about?" Noah clutched his wooden horse tightly, his expression solemn. "She says the bad man has eyes everywhere. We have to be extra careful with the baby." He pointed to Josie's belly. "Baby is important. Baby is part of the plan." The cryptic warning sent a chill through Josie. She instinctively placed a protective hand over her unborn child. What role could her baby possibly play in this unfolding drama? "We'll be careful," she promised Noah. "All of us." The church bell was ringing as they approached Millbrook, calling the faithful to worship. Josie had borrowed Pete Malloy's cart for the journey, both to spare herself the long walk and to maintain appearances. A pregnant woman arriving on foot with two male companions might cause unnecessary gossip. Millbrook's First Methodist Church stood on a small hill overlooking the town, its white clapboard siding and simple steeple, a beacon of normalcy in increasingly uncertain times. The churchyard was already filled with townsfolk, in their Sunday-best families, greeting one another, while children played among the gravestones. As their cart pulled up, Josie felt curious gazes turn their way. The story of her impulsive purchase at the auction had clearly spread, and now the town was eager to see the developments in this unexpected arrangement. Reverend Samuel Hayes, a silver-haired man with kind eyes and a weathered face, greeted them at the church steps. "Mrs. Hartwell, how lovely to see you. And you've brought guests, Mr. Maddox and young Noah, isn't it?" "Welcome, welcome all." "Thank you, Reverend," Josie replied, accepting his assistance down from the cart. "We're grateful for the invitation." "God's house is open to all his children," the Reverend said with particular emphasis that suggested he was well aware of the town's undercurrents. "I believe you'll find many friendly faces here today." His meaningful glance toward a group of women setting up tables for the after-service social confirmed Josie's suspicion that the Reverend was among those quietly opposing Hutchkins's influence. As they entered the church, Noah suddenly tensed, pressing against Josie's side. Following his gaze, she saw Silas Hutchkins seated in the front pew, his imposing figure unmistakable even from behind. Beside him sat Sheriff Morrison, a burly man whose badge gleamed in the light streaming through the stained glass windows. "Easy," Colt murmured, placing a reassuring hand on Noah's shoulder. "Remember what we discussed. We're just here for the service." And they found seats near the back where Josie could easily slip out if her pregnancy made sitting through the long service uncomfortable. As they settled in, she noticed a woman across the aisle watching them intently, a thin, careworn woman with intelligent eyes and a small leather bag tucked beside her hymnal. Noah noticed her too. "Medicine lady," he whispered, nudging Josie. Martha Keene gave them a barely perceptible nod before returning her attention to the front of the church where Reverend Hayes was preparing to begin the service. The sermon that morning seemed particularly pointed, a meditation on Exodus and the liberation of an oppressed people from the grip of a powerful tyrant. Though the Reverend never once glanced in Hutchkins's direction, the banker's shoulders grew visibly tenser as the sermon progressed. "Moses was not a warrior or a king." Reverend Hayes intoned, his voice rising with passion. He was a simple shepherd called by God to stand before Pharaoh and demand justice for the oppressed. And though Pharaoh hardened his heart again and again, though he used his power to crush those who dared to challenge him in the end, it was the humble shepherd who triumphed because God stands with those who seek justice and mercy. As the congregation filed out after the final hymn, Martha Keene maneuvered to walk beside Josie. "The quilting circle is meeting in the church basement after the social," she said quietly. "We'd be honored if you'd join us, Mrs. Hartwell. We're working on a special project that might interest you." Josie understood the coded invitation. "I'd be delighted, though I must warn you my stitches are far from perfect." "Perfect stitches aren't required," Martha replied with meaning. "Just a willingness to help complete the pattern." The social following the service was held in the churchyard with tables laden with covered dishes and desserts contributed by the congregation. Josie observed the careful dance of alliances and avoidances that characterized the gathering. Certain families, those who had lost property to Hutchkins, clustered together, while others, merchants and professionals dependent on the banker's goodwill, kept their distance. Colt stood slightly apart, Noah at his side, watching the proceedings with the wariness of a man who had learned the hard way that community could be fickle. Several former neighbors approached him cautiously, offering awkward greetings or apologetic explanations for their absence during his troubles. "Maddox," one man said, extending his hand. "Good to see you up and about. Heard you've been working for Mrs. Hartwell." "Winters," Colt corrected, using Josie's maiden name with a pointed look. "And yes, I've been helping with repairs to her property in exchange for lodging." The careful phrasing established both distance and propriety, important considerations in a small town where reputations could be destroyed by whispers. Noah, meanwhile, had found companions his own age. The Martinez twins, Elena and Carlos's daughters, had drawn him into a game of tag around the churchyard. For the first time, Josie saw him behaving like an ordinary child, laughing as he ran from the girls. "Your boy seems to be adjusting well," observed Dr. Clemens, appearing at Josie's elbow with a plate of food. "Here, you should eat something. You're feeding too, remember?" Josie accepted the plate gratefully. Noah's resilient. Children often are, if given half a chance. "And Maddox?" The doctor glanced toward Colt, who was now engaged in conversation with a young deputy, Wilson, Josie presumed. "Healing in more ways than one," Josie replied. "Sarah's journal was a revelation. All this time he thought he'd failed her by losing the ranch. Now he knows she understood what was happening, that she was fighting in her own way." Dr. Clemens nodded thoughtfully. "Knowledge can be a powerful medicine for the soul. Speaking of which," he lowered his voice, "Martha's quilting circle isn't just about gathering evidence. She's been working with Elena Martinez, who has certain gifts of perception." "Gifts?" Josie asked, curious. "Elena claims to be able to sense things about people, intentions, secrets, even past actions. Many dismiss it as superstition, but Martha believes her. Says Elena knew about her brother's death in the war before the telegram arrived." Josie thought of Noah's conversations with his wooden horse, of her own dreams that had led her to the auction. "I'm in no position to dismiss such possibilities," she said softly. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the far end of the churchyard. Silas Hutchkins was making his way toward them, his face set in a mask of cordial determination. Sheriff Morrison followed a few paces behind his hand, resting casually on his holstered pistol. "Mrs. Hartwell," Hutchkins called, his voice carrying across the suddenly quieter gathering. "I was hoping to have a word with you before you left." Josie steeled herself, acutely aware of the many eyes watching this encounter. "Of course, Mr. Hutchkins. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to extend an invitation," he said, stopping before her with a tight smile. "The territorial governor is visiting Millbrook next week for a banking conference. As a new resident of our community, especially one in your delicate condition, I thought you might appreciate an introduction. Governor Williams takes a particular interest in education, I believe." The offer seemed benign on the surface, but Josie sensed the trap beneath. An introduction to the governor would come with strings attached and likely expectations of gratitude that would compromise her growing alliance with Hutchkins's victims. "That's very thoughtful," she replied carefully, "though I'm afraid my condition makes formal socializing rather difficult at present. Perhaps after the baby arrives." Hutchkins's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand completely. However, the governor is also bringing his personal physician, Dr. Ashworth. Given your remote living situation, I took the liberty of mentioning your case to him. He's agreed to examine you while he's here, a precautionary measure you understand. Josie felt a chill of alarm. A doctor appointed by the governor, likely in Hutchins's pocket, could easily declare her unfit due to her pregnancy, giving Hutchins an opening to challenge her guardianship of Colt and Noah's contracts. I appreciate the concern, she said, struggling to keep her voice steady, but Dr. Clemens has been providing excellent care. Excellent but limited, Hutchins countered smoothly. Dr. Ashworth has trained in Vienna and London. Surely you wouldn't deny your child the benefit of the finest medical opinion available? Before Josie could respond, Colt appeared at her side, his posture protective without being overtly confrontational. Mrs. Hartwell's medical decisions are her own. Mr. Hutchins, though your concern is noted. Hutchins' gaze hardened as it shifted to Colt. Maddox, I see you found a new role as protector. How fortunate for Mrs. Hartwell to have such dedicated staff. The innuendo was slight but unmistakable, casting a shadow on Josie's reputation. Several nearby conversations faltered as people strained to overhear the exchange. Mr. Maddox has been invaluable in preparing my property for winter, Josie said clearly, ensuring her voice carried to those listening. His carpentry skills are quite remarkable, as Reverend Hayes can attest, having seen the repairs to my roof. The Reverend, sensing the tension, moved to join them. Indeed, Mrs. Hartwell, Mr. Maddox has always been known for his honest labor and skilled hands. Our community is blessed to have retained his talents regardless of the circumstances. The subtle rebuke was not lost on Hutchins, whose jaw tightened momentarily before his smooth facade returned. Well, I'll leave you to your socializing. Dr. Ashworth will call on Friday at 10. Sheriff Morrison will escort him as the location of your cabin is somewhat remote. With that parting shot reminding Josie of her vulnerability and isolation, Hutchins turned and walked away, Sheriff Morrison following in his wake. That man, Dr. Clemens muttered when they were out of earshot, has elevated intimidation to an art form. What does this mean? Josie asked, one hand instinctively moving to her belly. This doctor's visit, it means Hutchins is establishing groundwork, the Reverend said grimly. A territorial physician declaring concerns about your mental or physical fitness could be the first step toward removing your autonomy in legal matters, including my control of Colt and Noah's contracts, Josie realized, and potentially guardianship of your child once it's born, Dr. Clemens added. If he can paint you as unstable or incapable, the implications were horrifying. Josie had come west to escape the constraints placed on widowed women in St. Louis society, only to find herself facing an even more insidious threat to her independence. We need to move quickly, Colt said, his voice low and urgent, before Friday. Reverend Hayes nodded almost imperceptibly. The quilting circle awaits Mrs. Hartwell. I believe you'll find the patterns most illuminating. The church basement was cooler than the sun-warmed yard above its stone walls, providing welcome relief from the unseasonable warmth of the October afternoon. When Josie descended the narrow stairs, she found not the small gathering she had expected, but a council of war. Nearly 20 people were assembled around a large table, Martha and Henry Keene, Elena, and Carlos Martinez, the elderly Olson couple, the widowed Mrs. Patterson, and several other families Josie recognized from town, but had never formally met. Dr. Clemens was already present, and Deputy Wilson slipped in shortly after Josie and Colt arrived, carefully locking the door behind him. Welcome to the quilting circle, Martha Keene said with a grim smile. Though as you can see, we're stitching together something other than fabric. The table was covered not with quilt squares, but with documents, loan agreements, property deeds, bank statements, and surveyor's maps, all relating to Hutchins's activities over the past 3 years. Everyone here has lost something to Silas Hutchins, Martha continued. Land, livelihoods, family members. Some have been forced to work for the man who stole from them. Others have been driven from the county entirely. The Washingtons send their evidence from Kansas, Henry Keene added, gesturing to a stack of letters. They left after their oldest boy was beaten for questioning a fee adjustment on their loan. And my son, Mrs. Olson said, her Swedish accent thick with emotion, he run away rather than watch his father work our own fields for pennies. We have no word for 6 months now. The stories continued, each more heartbreaking than the last. The Martinez family had lost not only their ranch, but their status in the community, forced to live in a one-room shack behind the livery stable. Mrs. Patterson's late husband's blacksmith shop had been seized over a debt created by administrative errors. The Rileys had lost 3 generations of family land to foreclosure after a single missed payment during the father's illness. "But we're not just here to share sorrows," Martha said firmly when the testimonies finished. "We're here to build a case. Each of us has pieces of the puzzle. Together we can see the full picture of Hutchins's crimes." Colt stepped forward, placing Sarah's journal and the recovered mortgage documents on the table. "My late wife documented Hutchins's threats and falsified loan terms in the months before her death. She also witnessed something that may connect to Judge Franklin's death last year." A murmur ran through the gathering at the mention of the judge. Deputy Wilson leaned forward, his young face serious. "Franklin was investigating the bank before he died. Sheriff Morrison claimed it was routine, but the judge had requested special access to records going back 3 years. The same time frame when Hutchins began aggressively foreclosing on properties," Dr. Clemens noted. Martha unfolded a large map and spread it across the table. "This is what I found in Hutchins's office last month. It's a survey map from the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad showing planned routes through Millbrook County. The map revealed what they had suspected: every property Hutchins had seized lay along the proposed railroad route or within a shaded area marked acquisition priority. But that's not all," Martha continued, overlaying a second, more detailed map. "This one I found hidden in a false bottom drawer. It shows something even more valuable than railroad access." Elena Martinez gasped, pointing to the markings on the map. "Gold," she said, her English heavily accented but clear. "These are gold veins, deep in the earth." "Precisely," that Martha confirmed. "The railroad needs flat land for tracks and depots. Hutchins's silent partners, including the governor's brother-in-law, need the mineral rights beneath that land." "And none of us knew," Henry Keene said bitterly. "We worked that soil for generations, never knowing what lay beneath." Noah, who had been sitting quietly beside his father, suddenly spoke up. "Mama knew," he said clearly. "She found a funny rock in the creek last spring. Showed it to the man who came to fix our pump. He got real excited, asked where it came from. Next week, Hutchins came with new papers." All eyes turned to the boy, many widening in surprise at this unexpected testimony. "The man who fixed your pump," Deputy Wilson asked gently. "Was it Jim Morrison, the sheriff's brother?" Noah nodded. "He works for the train people now in Denver." The connection was damning. The sheriff's brother had identified gold on the Maddox property, reported it to Hutchins, and now worked for the railroad company poised to benefit from the massive land fraud. "This goes beyond local corruption," Reverend Hayes said gravely. "If the territorial governor is involved, then we need federal intervention," Josie finished. Thomas's law books were clear on this point. When territorial authorities are compromised, federal courts have jurisdiction over cases involving interstate commerce and large-scale fraud. "The railroad connection provides the interstate element," Dr. Clemens agreed, "and the gold mining conspiracy adds weight to the fraud charges." "But how do we get this evidence to federal authorities?" Carlos Martinez asked, speaking for the first time. "The sheriff controls the telegraph office. The mail is unreliable for sensitive documents. And none of us can leave without drawing attention, especially now that Hutchins is watching so closely." A heavy silence fell over the gathering as they confronted the practical difficulties of their situation. Hutchins had spent years building his power base, ensuring all official channels of communication and authority answered to him in some way. "There is a way," Deputy Wilson said finally. "The railroad survey team is still in town, staying at Murphy's Hotel. They're scheduled to complete their assessment and return to Denver on Friday. The same day Ashworth is coming to examine Josie," Colt noted with a concern. "Yes, but before that happens, we could approach the survey team directly," Wilson continued. "Show them the evidence of fraud affecting the very properties they're evaluating. No railroad wants to build on stolen land. The legal challenges would delay construction for years. And one of them, Marcus Webb, strikes me as unusual for a railroad man," Martha added. "He asks too many questions about local governance, banking practices, property transfers, almost as if he's investigating more than just land routes," Dr. Clemens finished thoughtfully. Elena Martinez suddenly straightened, her dark eyes focusing on something only she could see. "The man with the notebook," she said softly. "He has 2 faces. One he shows to the world, one he keeps hidden. But his heart seeks justice. The cryptic statement might have been dismissed by some, but in the basement room filled with people who had witnessed too many coincidences to trust in mere chance, Elena's words carried weight. If Webb is more than he appears, Josie said slowly, he could be our best hope for getting this evidence to authorities who can act on it. We need to approach him carefully, Colt cautioned. If he's not what we hope, if he's actually working with Hutchkins, we'd be revealing our hand too soon. I can arrange a meeting, Deputy Wilson offered. As part of my official duties, I could request his assistance with clarifying property boundaries for public safety purposes. When, Reverend Hayes asked? Time is clearly of the essence, especially with Dr. Ashworth's visit looming. Tomorrow, Wilson decided. I'll approach Webb in the morning, arrange for him to meet with concerned property owners. That would be you, Mrs. Hartwell, as the holder of Maddox's contract tomorrow afternoon. Murphy's Hotel has private dining rooms where discussions can happen away from curious eyes. The plan was risky but sound. If Webb was indeed sympathetic, or better yet, already investigating Hutchkins, they might find the ally they desperately needed. If not, they would have tipped their hand, but perhaps gained enough time to find another approach before Friday's examination. As the meeting concluded and plans were finalized, Noah tugged at Josie's sleeve. Baby is moving, he said, placing a small hand on her rounded belly. Baby knows we're fighting the bad man. The simple statement, delivered with a child's conviction, brought unexpected tears to Josie's eyes. Yes, she agreed softly. This little one will be born into a world where people stand up to bad men. I promise you that, Noah. The journey back to the cabin was subdued, each of them lost in thoughts of what the next days might bring. As the cart rounded the final bend in the road, Colt suddenly tensed his hand, going to Noah's shoulder in a protective gesture. Someone's been here, he said quietly, nodding toward the cabin. Josie saw it too. The door stood slightly ajar, though she was certain she had latched it securely before they left. Fresh horse tracks marked the yard, and the garden gate hung open. Stay in the cart, Colt instructed, helping Josie and Noah down behind a stand of trees that would shield them from view. I'll check inside. Be careful, Josie whispered, her hand finding Noah's and holding tight. They watched anxiously as Colt approached the cabin with cautious steps, pausing to listen at the door before pushing it fully open. Long minutes passed before he emerged again, beckoning them forward. They're gone, he reported grimly, but they were thorough. Inside, the evidence of a methodical search was clear. Drawers had been opened. Josie's trunk of personal belongings had been rifled through, and Thomas's law books had been moved from their shelves and stacked haphazardly on the table. Most telling of all, the loose floorboard, where they had initially hidden Sarah's journal before moving it to the church, had been pried up and carelessly replaced. They were looking for the documents, Josie said, feeling violated by the intrusion into her private space. And they didn't find them thanks to your foresight in bringing everything to the meeting, Colt added, checking the hiding places where they had stored other items. But they know we have something. This search was too targeted to be random intimidation. Noah moved to the corner where his few possessions were kept, relieved to find his wooden horse untouched. They didn't find Mama's secret, he said with quiet satisfaction. No, they didn't, Colt agreed, ruffling his son's hair. But this tells us something important, Noah. It tells us Mr. Hutchkins is worried about what we know. And worried men make mistakes, Josie added, summoning courage she didn't entirely feel. We just need to be ready when he does. They spent the evening restoring order to the cabin, each lost in their own thoughts about the escalating stakes of their situation. Josie found herself pausing frequently to rest, the day's stress and activity taking a toll on her pregnant body. You should sleep, Colt said gently, noticing her fatigue. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion added to our troubles. I'm not sure I can sleep, Josie admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see Hutchkins's face when he mentioned Dr. Ashworth. He's planning something, Colt. Something beyond a routine examination. I know, Colt agreed soberly. Which is why tomorrow's meeting with Webb is so critical. If he can help us get this evidence to federal authorities before Friday, and if he can't, Josie voiced the fear they had both been avoiding. Colt had no answer for that. Instead, he moved to stoke the fire, adding another log to ward off the autumn chill that seeped through the cabin's aging walls. Noah, who had been arranging his wooden horse and other small treasures on the shelf Colt had built for him, suddenly turned to them with an expression of alarming certainty. It's going to storm tomorrow, he announced. Mama says we need to be ready for the thunder. Josie and Colt exchanged concerned glances. The sky had been clear all day, with no hint of approaching weather. Did Mama say anything else? Colt asked carefully. Noah nodded, his small face solemn. She says the baby needs to stay very quiet during the storm. The bad man is listening for her voice. The cryptic warning sent a chill through Josie that had nothing to do with the night air. She placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling the child within shift and turn, as if responding to her anxiety. We'll be careful, she promised, though she had no idea what danger the coming storm might bring. That night, Josie dreamed of Thomas again. He stood on the porch of a schoolhouse she had never seen, beckoning her forward. Behind him, Sarah Maddox cradled an infant while Noah played at her feet. The scene was peaceful, bathed in golden light, until thunder split the sky and rain began to fall. Not water, but pages from Sarah's journal, each one catching fire as it touched the ground. The storm is coming, Thomas warned, his voice nearly lost in the rising wind. You must protect the child. The child is the key. Josie woke with a wasp, her nightgown damp with sweat despite the cool night air. Outside, the moon sailed clear and bright through a cloudless sky, giving no hint of the storm Noah had predicted. Yet the sense of foreboding from her dream lingered, settling around her heart like a weight. Unable to return to sleep, she lit a candle and moved to the cabin's single window. The barn where Colt and Noah slept was dark and still. Beyond it, the forest stretched into darkness, hiding whatever threats or promises tomorrow might bring. Give me strength, she whispered, one hand on her belly, the other on Thomas's Bible. For all of us. Morning brought no literal storm, but Noah's prediction proved accurate in other ways. Deputy Wilson arrived at the cabin just after dawn, his young face tense with urgent news. Hutchkins is moving faster than we expected, he reported, accepting the cup of coffee Josie offered. He's organized a town meeting for tonight, ostensibly to discuss railroad development, but really to build public support against troublemakers who might delay progress. Meaning us, Colt said grimly. Wilson nodded. And that's not all. Dr. Ashworth arrived early. He's already at Hutchkins's house. They're saying the governor needed him back in the capital sooner than expected, so he's conducting all his examinations today instead of Friday. Josie felt her heart sink. Their carefully laid plans were collapsing before they'd even begun. What about Webb? Were you able to arrange the meeting? Yes, that's the one piece of good news. He seemed very interested when I mentioned property disputes along the railroad route. He's expecting us at Murphy's Hotel at noon. Wilson hesitated, then added, but there's something else you should know. When I approached Webb, I got the distinct impression he was already aware of some of the issues we're concerned about. He asked specifically about the Maddox property and the timing of its foreclosure. Colt and Josie exchanged hopeful glances. Perhaps Elena's intuition about Webb having two faces was correct. We need to move now, Colt decided. Get to Murphy's Hotel before Hutchkins realizes we're gathering evidence against him. What about Dr. Ashworth? Josie asked, anxiety creeping into her voice. If he comes here and finds me gone. I've thought of that, Wilson said. Dr. Clemens is prepared to intercept Ashworth, claim there has been a medical emergency in town that requires his expertise. It should buy us a few hours at least. It was a tenuous plan, fraught with potential complications, but they had no better options. Time was running out, and their only hope lay in convincing Webb to help them before Hutchkins could mobilize the full extent of his influence against them. As they prepared to leave, gathering the precious documents and evidence they'd accumulated, Noah approached Josie with his wooden horse extended an offering. Take Mama with you, he said earnestly. She'll help you talk to the two-faced man. Josie accepted the carved figure, touched by Noah's willingness to part with his most treasured possession. I'll keep her safe, she promised, carefully tucking the horse into her bag alongside Sarah's journal. The journey to town seemed interminable, each bend in the road potentially hiding Hutchkins' men or other obstacles. Wilson rode ahead as scout, his deputy's badge providing some protection against casual questioning. Colt drove the cart with Josie and Noah huddled under blankets in the back to shield them from curious eyes. As they approached Millbrook, Wilson rejoined them with relieved news. The town's quiet. Hutchkins is meeting with the business owners at the bank. Sheriff Morrison is with him. It's the perfect time to slip into Murphy's Hotel unnoticed. The hotel stood at the far end of Millbrook's main street, a two-story structure that represented the town's aspirations to importance. Its dining room was known to host traveling salesmen, circuit judges, and other visitors whose business required privacy and discretion. Wilson led them through the hotel's back entrance, used primarily for deliveries and service staff. The kitchen was busy preparing the midday meal, providing cover for their arrival as they slipped through to a private dining room where Webb awaited them. Marcus Webb was not what Josie had expected. Rather than the rough-hewn surveyor or polished railroad executive, she had imagined he was a man of middle years, with the watchful eyes and careful movements of someone accustomed to observing without being observed. He wore simple clothes that would not have been out of place on any working man in Millbrook, yet there was an unmistakable authority in his bearing. "Deputy Wilson," he greeted them, rising from his seat at the table. "And you must be Mrs. Hartwell, Mr. Maddox." His gaze lingered briefly on Noah before returning to the adults. "I understand you have concerns about property disputes affecting the railroad's planned route." "That's putting it mildly, Mr. Webb," Josie replied, taking the seat he offered. "What we have is evidence of systematic fraud, illegal foreclosures, and possibly murder, all connected to the properties your company is seeking to acquire." If Webb was shocked by this blunt opening, he didn't show it. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully, as if she had merely confirmed something he already suspected. "Serious allegations." He said, his tone neutral but not dismissive. "I assume you have documentation to support these claims?" Colt placed Sarah's journal and the recovered mortgage documents on the table. Wilson added the maps Martha had copied from Hutchkins' office, while Josie contributed the testimonies they had gathered from the other affected families. "This is Sarah Maddox's journal," Colt explained, opening it to the most damning entries. "My late wife. She documented Hutchkins's threats, the alteration of our loan terms, and her suspicions about Judge Franklin's death." Webb examined the journal carefully, his expression revealing nothing as he read Sarah's detailed accounts. When he looked up, his eyes were sharper, more focused. "And these other documents, the property maps with the gold deposits marked, copied from Hutchkins's private office by Martha Keene," Wilson explained. "She's been working there to pay off an artificially inflated debt another of Hutchkins's victims." Webb studied the maps intently, comparing them to official railroad surveys he produced from his own portfolio. "The correlation is unmistakable," he murmured almost to himself. "Every property acquired through foreclosure in the past 3 years sits atop these mineral deposits or along the optimal rail route." "It's not just about the railroad, is it?" Josie asked, watching Webb's reaction closely. "It's about the gold. Hutchkins and his partners, including the territorial governor, are creating a mining empire built on stolen land." Webb's gaze met hers, and for the first time she saw a crack in his carefully neutral facade. "You're very well informed, Mrs. Hartwell." "My late husband was studying law," Josie replied. "I kept his books in his belief that justice should be accessible to all, not just those with power and influence." A faint smile touched Webb's lips. "Thomas Hartwell. I've heard the name. His articles on educational reform were controversial in certain circles." Josie felt a surge of surprise and pride that this stranger knew of Thomas's work. "Yes, they were. Are you familiar with educational theory, Mr. Webb? That seems unusual for a railroad surveyor." "I have varied interests," Webb replied, his smile deepening slightly, "including the proper application of federal law in territories where local governance may be compromised." Understanding dawned on Josie. "You're not really a railroad man, are you?" Webb glanced at the closed door, then reached into his coat and withdrew a small leather case. Inside was a badge and identification. "Marcus Webb, Special Investigator, United States Department of Justice. I've been investigating Silas Hutchkins and his associates for the past 6 months," Webb explained, returning the badge to his pocket. The railroad survey provided the perfect cover to examine property transactions without arousing suspicion. The revelation sent a wave of relief through Josie. They hadn't needed to convince Webb of Hutchkins's crimes. He was already building a case against the banker and his co-conspirators. "Then you can help us," Colt said urgently. "Hutchkins is moving to silence us. He's brought in a territorial physician to declare Josie unfit due to her pregnancy. He's organizing a public meeting tonight to turn the town against anyone questioning his development plans. And he searched our cabin while we were at church yesterday," Josie added. "He knows we have evidence against him." Webb's expression grew grave. "That accelerates matters. I was planning to conclude my investigation next week when my colleagues arrive from Denver, but if Hutchkins is already taking action against witnesses, their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. Wilson moved to answer it, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. It was Robert Chen, one of the other railroad representatives, his face tense with urgency. "Webb, we have a situation. Hutchkins and Sheriff Morrison are downstairs asking for you. They say it's about property verification for tomorrow's final survey." Webb's response was immediate and decisive. "Mrs. Hartwell, I need these documents, all of them. I'll get them to my colleagues in Denver immediately via special courier. Mr. Maddox, you and your son should leave now through the kitchen. Deputy Wilson can create a distraction in the main dining room." "What about Josie?" Colt asked, reluctant to leave her behind. "I'll escort Mrs. Hartwell out after I've dealt with Hutchkins," Webb assured him. "Her presence here can be explained by the story we established consulting about property boundaries. Yours cannot." It was the logical approach, but Josie could see the conflict in Colt's eyes, the need to protect his son warring with his reluctance to leave her facing Hutchkins alone. "Go," she urged him softly. "No one needs you. I'll be fine with Mr. Webb." Colt hesitated, then nodded grimly. "We'll meet at Martha Keene's house. It's closest, and Henry will be there if there's trouble." As Colt and Noah slipped out through the service door, with Wilson, Webb quickly gathered the documents, securing them inside his coat. "Stay calm," he advised Josie. "Let me do the talking. Hutchkins suspects something, but he doesn't know how much we know or that I'm not who I appear to be." Josie nodded, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, as if sensing her anxiety. She placed a hand over her belly, feeling the small life within her, a reminder of everything at stake in this confrontation. Webb moved to open the door, his posture and expression shifting subtly into the persona of the railroad surveyor. "Whatever happens," he murmured as footsteps approached in the hallway, "remember that justice is coming for Silas Hutchkins. Today's storm will pass." Noah's prediction of a storm echoed in Josie's mind as Hutchkins's imposing figure appeared in the doorway, his cold eyes taking in the scene with calculating precision. Behind him loomed Sheriff Morrison, hand resting meaningfully on his holstered pistol. "Mrs. Hartwell," Hutchkins said, false concern dripping from every syllable. "How surprising to find you here. Dr. Ashworth has been waiting at your cabin for nearly an hour. We were growing quite concerned about your welfare." The storm had indeed arrived, and Josie found herself at its center with only her wits and Webb's uncertain protection, standing between her and the fury of a powerful man who had already destroyed so many lives. Outside, real thunder rumbled in the distance as clouds gathered over Millbrook, fulfilling Noah's prophecy in both literal and figurative terms. The long-brewing confrontation between justice and corruption was about to break over them all. "Mr. Hutchkins," Josie acknowledged, fighting to keep her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. "How considerate of you to come looking for me. I apologize for any inconvenience to Dr. Ashworth, but urgent matters required my attention in town." "Urgent matters concerning railroad property acquisitions?" Hutchkins' gaze shifted between Josie and Webb, suspicious and calculating. "Curious business for a pregnant widow with no land holdings of her own." "Not at all curious," Webb interjected smoothly. "Mrs. Hartwell approached me with questions about the legal status of labor contracts connected to foreclosed properties. As the current holder of Mr. Maddox's contract, she has legitimate concerns about how the railroad's plans might affect her financial arrangements." Hutchkins' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Always the concerned citizen, aren't you, Mrs. Hartwell, first rescuing Maddox and his boy from their just consequences, now involving yourself in complex business matters that surely exceed your understanding." The condescension in his tone made Josie's spine stiffen. "I may be a woman, Mr. Hutchkins, but I assure you my understanding extends to recognizing fraud when I see it." A dangerous silence followed her bold statement. Sheriff Morrison shifted his weight, and his hand still resting on his pistol. Webb moved almost imperceptibly, positioning himself between Josie and the lawman and man. "Fraud is a serious accusation," Hutchkins said, finally, his voice soft but edged with menace. "One that requires substantial evidence and legal standing to pursue, neither of which you possess, Mrs. Hartwell." "Perhaps not alone," Josie conceded, drawing strength from the knowledge that Sarah's journal and the other documents were safely hidden within Webb's coat. "But I'm not alone, am I, Mr. Hutchkins, the Keens, the Martinezes, the Olsons, the Pattersons all have similar stories about mysteriously changing loan terms and missing payment records. Disgruntled debtors always blame their creditors. Hutchkins dismissed with a wave of his hand, rather than facing their own financial incompetence. And Judge Franklin, Josie pressed, watching Hutchins's face closely. Was he incompetent too when he began investigating your banking practices last year? The banker's composure slipped for just an instant, a tightening around the eyes, a momentary tensing of the jaw before his mask of confidence returned. Judge Franklin's unfortunate riding accident was a tragedy for our community. To imply anything else is not only false, but potentially slanderous, Mrs. Hartwell. No one mentioned anything but an accident, Webb observed mildly. Interesting that you would leap to such a conclusion. Hutchkins turned his cold gaze on Webb. I don't believe we've been properly introduced, Mr. Webb. Marcus Webb Acquisition Assessment for Denver and Rio Grande. Webb extended his hand, which Hutchkins ignored. And your interest in Mrs. Hartwell's concerns purely professional. The railroad can't afford legal complications with its land acquisitions. Clear title is essential for our investors' confidence. Thunder rumbled again closer now, and rain began to patter against the hotel's windows. The promised storm had arrived in earnest, mirroring the tension in the small dining room. Sheriff Hutchkins said abruptly, I believe Dr. Ashworth would appreciate an escort back to town, since it appears Mrs. Hartwell won't be returning to her cabin soon. Perhaps you could also remind Deputy Wilson of his scheduled patrol duties. I noticed him lingering downstairs when he should be attending to public safety. It was a transparent attempt to separate Josie from her allies, but Morrison nodded and departed without question, leaving Hutchkins alone with Josie and Webb. Once the sheriff's footsteps faded, Hutchins's demeanor changed, the veneer of civility dropping away like a discarded coat. Let me be perfectly clear, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Whatever you think you know, whatever evidence you believe you've gathered, it will not help you. The territorial governor signs my bank's charter. The county judge holds his position at my recommendation. Even your precious railroad, he glanced contemptuously at Webb, negotiates through channels I control. And yet, Josie replied, summoning courage from some deep reserve, here we are, a pregnant widow, an orphan boy, and a dispossessed rancher, the very people you thought too weak, too broken to fight back, bringing your entire empire to the edge of collapse. Hutchkins laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. Is that what you think is happening here? That you're winning some noble battle for justice? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. By tonight, you'll be under Dr. Ashworth's care in the territorial asylum. Maddox will be back in chains, and that mute boy will become a ward of the county under my guardianship, of course. You seem very confident for a man about to be indicted for fraud, theft, and murder. Webb commented, dropping all pretense of neutrality. Hutchkins turned slowly to face him, reassessing the supposed railroad man with new wariness. And who exactly will be bringing these indictments, Mr. Webb? Or should I say whatever your real name might be? Webb smiled thinly. Marcus Webb, Special Investigator, United States Department of Justice. I've been building a case against you for 6 months, Hutchkins. Today I have everything I need to complete it. For the first time, genuine alarm flickered across Hutchkins' features. You're bluffing. If you had evidence of any wrongdoing, you'd have acted already. We like our cases thorough in the Justice Department, Webb replied, especially when they involve territorial officials and interstate commerce. The testimony we've gathered from your victims was compelling, but Mrs. Hartwell and Mr. Maddox provided the final pieces today, including Sarah Maddox's journal detailing your threats against Judge Franklin. Hutchkins' face drained of color. That's impossible. Sarah Maddox died of consumption. She was bedridden for months before her death. Yet she managed to document your every visit, your every threat, Josie said. A dying woman's testimony written in her own hand describing how you pressured her to sign over mineral rights while her husband worked the fields, how you threatened her child's future if she refused, and how you visited Judge Franklin the day before his accident, Webb added. Interesting coincidence that. Hutchkins' composure cracked entirely. You have nothing but the fever dreams of a dying woman and the desperate lies of her bankrupt husband. No court would. He was interrupted by a commotion from downstairs. Raised voices, heavy footsteps on the stairs. The door burst open to reveal Sheriff Morrison, his face flushed with anger and exertion. "Hutchkins," he barked, "we've got trouble. Federal marshals just rode into town, 4 of them, asking questions about the bank. And Maddox is at the Keene's place showing people those damn documents he found." The banker's eyes narrowed as he glared at Webb. "You planned this? A diversion while your colleagues moved in." "Justice moves at its own pace," Webb replied calmly, "but it always arrives eventually." Hutchkins turned to Morrison. "Arrest them, both of them. The woman for fraudulent claims against the bank, this man for impersonating a railroad official." Morrison hesitated, his gaze darting between his longtime benefactor and the man claiming federal authority. "I don't know, Silas. Federal marshals are serious business. If we're in the wrong here—" "Do I need to remind you of your brother's involvement?" Hutchkins hissed. "If I fall, Jim falls with me. As do you. Now do your duty, Sheriff." The threat worked. Morrison drew his pistol, pointing it first at Webb. "You're under arrest, both of you. Hands where I can see them." Webb remained unnervingly calm. "Sheriff Morrison, I suggest you reconsider. Arresting a federal agent in the performance of his duties is a serious offense, one that carries significant prison time regardless of local influences." "He's bluffing," Hutchkins insisted. "Where's his badge, his credentials?" "Anyone can claim federal authority." The standoff might have continued indefinitely had fate not intervened in the form of Noah Maddox. The boy slipped through the half-open door, evading Morrison's attempt to grab him, and ran straight to Josie. In his hand, he clutched his wooden horse. "Noah!" Josie gasped instinctively, drawing him close. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be with your father." "Mama said to bring her," Noah replied, pressing the wooden horse into Josie's hands. "She said the bad man needs to see." Hutchkins's face contorted with rage. "Get that brat out of here. This is no place for children." Noah turned to face the banker, his small features set with unexpected determination. "You hurt my mama," he said clearly. "You made her cry. You pushed the judge off the cliff. She saw you." "Shut up!" Hutchkins shouted, his composure disintegrating completely. "The ravings of a disturbed child mean nothing." "Then why are you so afraid of a wooden toy?" Webb asked quietly, nodding toward Hutchkins' hands, which had begun to tremble visibly. Noah stepped forward, his fears seemingly forgotten as he addressed the sheriff. "Mama carved a special place in the horse's belly, for the things she saw, for the truth." All eyes turned to the wooden horse in Josie's hands. With trembling fingers, she examined the carving more closely, finding a nearly invisible seam along the belly. When she pressed gently, a small compartment opened, revealing a tightly folded paper. "Give me that." Hutchkins lunged forward, but Morrison instinctively blocked his path, as surprised by the revelation as everyone else. Webb carefully took the paper from Josie, unfolding it to reveal a letter written in Sarah's distinctive hand, addressed to the authorities concerned with justice, and dated 3 days before her death. "I, Sarah Elizabeth Maddox, being of sound mind though failing body," Webb read aloud him, "hereby testify that on April 12, 1873, I witnessed Silas Hutchkins push Judge William Franklin from Lookout Ridge during what appeared to be a heated argument. The judge had visited our ranch that morning to discuss irregularities he had found in banking records concerning our mortgage. He mentioned similar issues with other properties and his intention to request a federal audit. I observed their later encounter while gathering herbs on the ridge, staying hidden when I sensed the danger in their confrontation. I have lived with this knowledge, fearing for my family's safety should I reveal it. Now, as death approaches, I entrust this testimony to whoever finds my son's wooden horse, praying it reaches those who can bring justice to our community." The silence that followed was profound, but broken only by the increasing fury of the storm outside and Hutchins's ragged breathing. "Lies," he finally managed, though his voice had lost all conviction. "Delusions of a dying woman. The ridge where Judge Franklin fell has distinctive vegetation," Webb noted. "Herbs that a knowledgeable woman might indeed harvest. I'm sure the federal marshals would be interested in examining the scene with this new information." Morrison lowered his gun slowly, the realization of his precarious position finally dawning. "Silas, if this is true—" "It's not," Hutchkins snapped. "And even if it were, who would take the word of a dead woman and her mute brat over mine? I built this town. I control." "Not anymore," came a new voice from the doorway. Colt Maddox stood there flanked by Dr. Clemens and Deputy Wilson. Behind them, Josie could see Martha and Henry Keene, the Martinezes, and several other families from the quilting circle. The federal marshals have the bank records. Colt continued, his eyes fixed on Hutchins with cold determination. The real ones from the locked cabinet in your office. Martha had a key made months ago. And they have sworn statements from 17 families about falsified loans, forged documents, and threats against those who question you, Dr. Clemens added, plus testimony from the railroad's actual land acquisition officer about your brother-in-law's mining company and the illegal transfers of mineral rights. Wilson concluded. It's over, Hutchins. For a moment, it seemed Hutchins might still attempt to bluff his mark out. Then, with frightening suddenness, he lunged toward Josie, pulling a small derringer from his coat pocket. If I'm finished, so are you, he snarled, aiming the weapon at her swollen belly. No witnesses, no testimony, nothing. Several things happened at once. Noah screamed and threw himself in front of Josie. Morrison shouted a warning. Webb moved to intercept Hutchins, and Colt launched himself across the room with desperate speed. The derringer fired with a deafening crack in the confined space. Josie felt Noah's small body jerk against her, heard Colt's anguished cry, saw Webb tackle Hutchins to the floor. Noah, Josie fell to her knees beside the boy who had collapsed against her. Blood was spreading across his small shirt, too much blood for his tiny frame. No, please, God, no. Colt was beside them in an instant, gathering Noah into his arms, his face ashen with terror. Son, Noah, look at me. Noah's eyes fluttered open, dazed but conscious. Did I save the baby? He whispered. Mama said I had to save the baby. Dr. Clemens pushed through the stunned onlooker's medical bag, already open. Let me see him, he commanded gently, moving Noah's shirt aside to reveal the wound, a deep graze across his shoulder, bleeding profusely, but not immediately life-threatening. He'll be all right, the doctor assured the frantic parents. The bullet didn't penetrate deeply. He needs stitches and rest, but he'll recover. Relief crashed over Josie, and a dizzying wave followed immediately by a different kind of pain, sharp and insistent, radiating from her lower back around to her abdomen. The stress, the fear, the physical exertion of the day had taken their toll. Her waters broke in a sudden rush, soaking her skirts and the floor beneath her. The baby, she gasped, clutching her belly as the first true contractions seized her. It's coming, now, I ended. What followed was a blur of activity. Morrison and Wilson took Hutchins into custody, handing him over to the federal marshals who had arrived at the hotel. Webb organized the gathering of final statements and evidence, while Martha Keene and Elena Martinez helped Dr. Clemens prepare for Josie's unexpected delivery. We need to move her, Dr. Clemens insisted. A hotel dining room is no place to birth a child. There's no time, Martha countered, her nursing experience evident in her calm efficiency. That baby is coming fast. First births are usually slow, but not when they're early and stressed like this one. They cleared the dining table, covering it with clean tablecloths from the hotel's linen closet. Colt stayed by Noah's side while Dr. Clemens quickly stitched and bandaged the boy's wound, then moved to assist with Josie's rapidly progressing labor. You're doing wonderfully, the doctor encouraged as Josie fought through another contraction. The baby is in perfect position, just eager to arrive. Outside, the storm reached its peak, rain lashing against the windows, while thunder shook the building's foundations. Inside, Josie battled her own storm, each contraction more powerful than the last. I can't, she gasped after a particularly vicious pain. I can't do this. You can, Colt assured her now, holding her hand while Noah, pale but determined, sat nearby clutching his wooden horse. You're the strongest person I know, Josie Hartwell. Stronger than all of us. As the pain intensified, Josie felt herself slipping into a strange twilight state, neither fully conscious nor unconscious. The room around her seemed to fade, replaced by a luminous landscape she didn't recognize. Standing before her were two figures instantly familiar, though she had never seen them together in life. Thomas, her beloved husband, stood tall and healthy as he had been before consumption claimed him. Beside him was a woman Josie somehow knew must be Sarah Maddox, beautiful and vibrant, with Noah's eyes and gentle smile. You've done so well, Thomas said, his voice exactly as she remembered. Both of you. The hardest part is over, Sarah added, her hand extended as if in blessing. Now you must complete what we began. I don't understand, Josie tried to say, though no sound emerged in this strange between place. What did you begin? A family, Thomas answered simply, a home for broken souls, a place where justice and love can flourish. The baby is the seal of that covenant, Sarah explained. Born of sorrow, but destined for joy. It hurts, Josie whispered. I'm afraid. All birth involves pain, Shreo acknowledged. But what comes after is worth every moment. We'll be watching, Thomas promised. Always. The vision began to fade, the luminous landscape dissolving back into the hotel dining room with its anxious faces and driving rain beyond the windows. Push now, Dr. Clemens urged. The baby's head is crowning. Josie gathered her remaining strength, bearing down with primal intensity as lightning flashed momentarily, illuminating the room in harsh white light. In that frozen instant of illumination, she could have sworn she still saw Thomas and Sarah standing behind Colt and Noah, their hands extended in blessing. Then the moment followed, and with one final tremendous effort, Josie felt her child slip into the waiting world. A thin cry rose above the storm's fury, growing stronger, with each passing second life asserting itself against all odds. A girl, Martha announced, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. A perfect baby girl. Dr. Clemens quickly examined the infant, wiping her clean and wrapping her in a soft hotel tablecloth. She's small but healthy, he confirmed, placing the newborn on Josie's chest. A fighter like her mother. The baby's cries subsided as she found herself in Josie's arms, tiny fingers flexing against warm skin. Josie stared in wonder at the new life she had created, this miracle born amid chaos and danger, yet radiating peace. Noah, Colt said softly, helping her white son move closer to see the baby. Meet your sister. Noah, still pale from his wound, but eyes bright with wonder, reached out to touch the baby's hand. Immediately, the tiny fingers curled around his, holding on with surprising strength. She knows me, he whispered in awe. Mama told her about me. What shall we name her? Colt asked Josie, his voice thick with emotion. Josie looked up at him, then at Noah, seeing in both their faces the shadow of the woman who had begun this journey with her hidden journal and wooden horse. The woman whose courage and foresight had saved them all. Sarah, Josie said without hesitation. Sarah Hope Hartwell. Noah's face lit up. Mama will like that. As if in agreement, the storm outside began to subside, the thunder receding into the distance, the rain gentling from violent downpour to steady patter. And through a break in the clouds, a shaft of golden sunlight pierced the dining room window, falling directly across the newborn child in a blessing of light. The aftermath of that tumultuous day unfolded with surprising swiftness. Webb's federal colleagues took Hutchins into custody, along with Sheriff Morrison and several other conspirators. The evidence against them was overwhelming: Sarah's journal and letter, the falsified loan documents, testimony from numerous victims, and financial records, showing the complex web of fraud extending all the way to the territorial governor's office. Dr. Ashworth, confronted with federal agents and irrefutable evidence of corruption, quickly abandoned his mission to declare Josie unfit. Instead, he examined both mother and child professionally, pronouncing them healthy, despite the dramatic circumstances of the birth. The baby is small but perfectly formed, he declared, and Mrs. Hartwell shows remarkable resilience. I see no reason for concern about either's welfare provided they receive proper rest and nutrition. The federal investigation expanded beyond Millbrook, eventually reaching all the way to the territorial capital. The governor himself resigned rather than face indictment, and numerous officials were removed for their roles in the conspiracy. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, eager to distance itself from the scandal, pledged to negotiate fair compensation with all affected property owners. For Josie, Colt, Noah, and baby Sarah, the days following the confrontation at Murphy's Hotel were a time of healing and quiet joy. They returned to Josie's cabin once she was strong enough to travel, finding it transformed by the caring hands of their newfound community. The Quilting Circle families had cleaned and repaired the modest dwelling, stocked it with food and supplies, and even added a proper cradle for baby Sarah, carved by Henry Keene in a style reminiscent of Noah's wooden horse. Noah's shoulder healed quickly, the wound leaving a scar that Clemens assured would fade with time. More importantly, the trauma of Hutchins's attack seemed to have broken through the wall of silence that had constrained the boy since his mother's death. He spoke more freely now, especially to baby Sarah, telling her stories about the mother she was named for, and the wooden horse that had helped save them all. One evening a week after Sarah's birth, Josie sat in the rocking chair on the cabin's porch nursing the baby while watching the sunset paint the autumn sky in shades of gold and crimson. Colt joined her, bringing a cup of tea and a warm blanket against the evening chill. "Webb sent word," he said, settling on the porch step beside her chair. "Hutchins has been formally charged with Judge Franklin's murder, along with fraud conspiracy and attempted murder. They don't expect him to ever leave federal prison." "And the land?" Josie asked. "The properties he stole, all being returned to their rightful owners," Colt confirmed, "including our ranch." He hesitated, then corrected himself. "My ranch, though it needs considerable work after sitting abandoned these past months." Josie studied his profile in the fading light, noting the conflict in his expression. "You should go back," she said softly. "Rebuild what Sarah loved. Give Noah the home he remembers." Colt turned to meet her gaze, his eyes troubled. "And leave you and baby Sarah here alone." "We would manage," Josie said, though the thought of their departure created a hollow ache beneath her breastbone. "This cabin has sheltered us through the worst storms. It will serve until I can establish the school Thomas and I planned." "The school," Colt repeated thoughtfully. "You still intend to pursue that dream?" "More than ever. This community needs healing after Hutchins's reign. Education opportunity, a place where children can grow beyond the shadows of what happened here." She looked down at baby Sarah, now drowsing contentedly at her breast. "I want my daughter to inherit a world built on justice and knowledge, not fear and greed." Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities and fears. Finally, Colt took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for a difficult admission. "I've been thinking about the ranch," he said slowly. 300 acres is more than Noah and I need. The southern portion near Miller's Creek, with that stand of oak trees, it would make an ideal location for a school. Good water, natural protection from winter winds close enough to town for children to reach it easily. Josie's heart quickened. "What are you suggesting?" "A partnership," Colt replied, his voice gaining confidence. "The ranch has good grazing land that shouldn't go to waste, but it also has room for a school for a future bigger than just cattle and crops." He paused, then added more softly, "Room for a family that's been pieced together from broken parts, but somehow fits just right." "Colt Maddox," Josie said, her voice catching slightly. "Are you proposing a business arrangement or something more?" He smiled, then the full, unguarded smile she had seen so rarely during their short acquaintance. "Both, I think. I'm not a man of fancy words, Josie, but I know that what's grown between us these past weeks is something rare and precious, something I never expected to find again after Sarah died. And you don't feel disloyal to her memory." Colt's gaze turned distant for a moment, contemplative rather than sad. "I used to think loving someone new would mean loving Sarah less. But that's not how the heart works, is it? Love isn't divided when it's shared, it multiplies." He reached out to touch baby Sarah's downy head. "This little one taught me that. She carries Thomas's blood and your love, yet there's room in her heart for Noah and me too." Tears pricked at Josie's eyes, unexpected but welcome. "Thomas would approve of you," she said softly. "He always said the measure of a man was how he faced injustice, not how he profited from justice." "And Sarah would have adored you," Colt returned. "Your courage, your compassion, the way you took in a battered man and his silent son, without hesitation." The moment was interrupted by Noah, who emerged from the cabin clutching his wooden horse in a drawing he had made of baby Sarah. He studied the adults with solemn consideration before asking the question, clearly weighing on his mind. "Are we going to be a real family now? All of us together?" Colt looked to Josie, leaving the answer in her hands. She reached out, drawing Noah closer with her free arm. "I think we already are," she told him. "A family isn't just blood relations, Noah. It's people who choose each other, who protect and care for each other through storms and sunshine." Noah nodded, accepting this wisdom with the gravity of a child who had seen both the worst and best of what people could do to one another. "Good," he said firmly, "because baby Sarah needs a father and a brother. And I think—" He hesitated, then continued with shy determination, "I think I need a mother again." Josie's heart overflowed. "Oh, Noah, I would be honored to be your mother, if that's truly what you want." Instead of answering with words, Noah placed his wooden horse in baby Sarah's cradle. "Mama can watch over both of us now," he explained, The real mama and you, Josie mama. The simple gesture, so full of acceptance and hope, was more profound than any formal ceremony could have been. Colt's hand found Josie's, their fingers intertwining in silent agreement about the path forward. 6 months later, as spring breathed new life into the land, the community gathered again, not in fear or secret resistance, but in celebration. The schoolhouse stood completed on the southern edge of the Maddox Ranch, a sturdy structure built with lumber donated by families grateful to see Hutchins's reign of terror ended. Its wide windows faced east to catch the morning sun, and a bell tower rose from the center of the roof, housing the bell that had once called worshipers to Reverend Hayes's church before the congregation outgrew the old building. Inside, wooden desks, arranged in neat rows, awaited the children of Millbrook and surrounding farms. Bookshelves lined the walls filled with volumes donated by families from as far away as St. Louis, a testament to how widely the story of Millbrook's liberation had spread. At the front of the room, a large slate blackboard bore the carefully chalked words, Hartwell Maddox School of Opportunity, all are welcome here. Josie stood on the schoolhouse steps, baby Sarah on her hip, watching as families arrived for the dedication ceremony. The child had grown sturdy and strong in the months since her dramatic birth, her eyes bright with curiosity about the gathering crowd. At 6 months old, she already showed signs of both her parents' determination reaching for objects beyond her grasp with unwavering persistence. Noah ran among the arriving children, no longer the silent, traumatized boy Josie had first encountered at the auction. Now 8 years old, he had appointed himself unofficial tour guide, proudly showing off the school building he had helped design. The scar on his shoulder had faded to a thin white line, a badge of courage rather than a mark of violence. Nervous, Colt asked, appearing beside Josie in his Sunday best, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaved for the occasion. A little, she admitted. This was Thomas's dream as much as mine. I want to honor that properly. Colt's arm slipped around her waist, a gesture that still sent a pleasant warmth through her, even after months of marriage. Their wedding had been a quiet affair at Reverend Hayes's church, witnessed by their growing circle of friends, and blessed, Josie felt certain, by those who watched from beyond the veil. He would be proud, Colt assured her, as would Sarah. They started this journey, we're just continuing it in our own way. The simple gold band on Josie's finger caught the spring sunlight. Colt had crafted it himself, melting down both her ring from Thomas and Sarah's wedding band to create something new that honored what had come before, a perfect symbol of their blended family and shared purpose. The ceremony began with Reverend Hayes offering a blessing on the new school and its mission. Dr. Clemens spoke about the importance of education in building a community resistant to corruption and exploitation. Martha Keene, now the head of the newly formed town council, presented Josie with a hand-sewn American flag for the schoolhouse, created by the same quilting circle that had once gathered evidence against Hutchins. When it was Josie's turn to speak, she stepped forward with baby Sarah still in her arms, a deliberate choice to emphasize that this school was born from the same hope that had sustained her through the darkest days. 1 year ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. I arrived in Millbrook as a stranger, a widow expecting a child with nothing but grief and uncertainty before me. Today I stand before you as a teacher, a mother to 2 wonderful children, a wife, and most importantly, a member of this remarkable community. She paused, surveying the faces before her faces that had transformed from suspicious strangers to trusted friends and allies. The Hartwell Maddox School is more than just a building. It is a promise to our children that knowledge will always triumph over ignorance, that justice will prevail over corruption, and that love can rebuild what greed destroys. Here, every child, regardless of background, circumstances, or past hardships, will find the tools to forge their own future. Noah had returned to stand beside Colt, his small hand slipping into his father's larger one, as they watched Josie with matching expressions of pride. Thomas Hartwell and Sarah Maddox never met in life. Josie continued, emotion thickening her voice. Yet their dreams and sacrifices have converged in this place in this moment. Thomas believed education could liberate the oppressed. Sarah believed truth would eventually overcome deceit. Both gave everything they had to protect the future, a future they would never see themselves. Baby Sarah cooed and reached toward the crowd, as if acknowledging her namesake's mention. A ripple of tender laughter moved through the gathering. This school stands as their legacy and as a testament to what ordinary people can accomplish when they stand together against injustice. The tyranny that once gripped Millbrook has been broken, but the work of building a truly just community has only begun. That work starts here with our children. As Josie concluded her speech and the ribbon across the schoolhouse door was cut, Noah stepped forward with a small wooden plaque he and Colt had crafted together. Carved into its surface were simple words that captured the spirit of everything they had endured and overcome. For all broken souls seeking healing, for all silenced voices seeking expression, for all darkened trances seeking light, enter and find hope. The plaque was mounted beside the door, and as the community filed into the schoolhouse for the first time, Josie felt a sense of completion that transcended mere happiness. The circle that had begun with Thomas's dreams and Sarah's courage had expanded to include all of them, the living and the dead, the broken and the healing, united in a common purpose greater than any individual loss or triumph. That evening, as twilight settled over the ranch and the distant schoolhouse bell rang to mark the hour, Josie sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching Noah teach baby Sarah to clap her hands. Colt joined them, bringing coffee and the contentment of a day well spent. "I saw something today," Noah said, suddenly, his expression thoughtful. "During the ceremony when you were speaking." "What did you see?" Josie asked, recognizing the particular tone that often preceded one of Noah's uncanny observations. "Two people standing behind you," he replied. "A man and a woman. They were smiling. The man had glasses like in your picture of Thomas. The woman looked like your mother," Colt finished softly. Noah nodded. "They put their hands on baby Sarah's head like a blessing. Then they smiled at each other and walked into the schoolhouse. I think," he hesitated, searching for words to express concepts beyond his years. "I think they were saying the work is done now. The bad things are fixed. They can rest." Josie and Colt exchanged glances, neither questioning the truth of what Noah had seen. They had witnessed too many inexplicable connections between this world and the next to dismiss such visions. "I believe they can rest," Josie agreed, reaching out to stroke Noah's hair, "because they know we'll continue what they started, all of us together." As if to confirm this, baby Sarah let out a peal of laughter, her first true laugh, the sound carrying across the twilight-hushed yard like bells of celebration. Above them, the first stars appeared in the deepening blue sky, watching over a family forged in tragedy but flourishing in hope. The wooden horse sat on the porch railing, its carved eyes seeming to reflect the starlight. Its secret compartment was empty now, its hidden testimony delivered its purpose fulfilled. Yet Josie knew they would keep it always a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary objects could carry the most extraordinary truths, and that voices silenced in life could still speak powerfully from beyond. "Tomorrow will be your first real day of teaching," Colt observed, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Our first day," Josie corrected him. "Your carpentry lessons for the older boys are just as important as my reading and arithmetic." "A new beginning," he agreed. "No," Noah said, with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Not new, just continuing, like the story Mama used to tell about the river that goes underground but comes up again somewhere else, still the same river." Josie smiled, recognizing the profound truth in his words. Nothing was ever truly lost, not love, not courage, not justice. They simply transformed, flowing through hidden channels before emerging again, sometimes in unexpected places and forms. Baby Sarah yawned widely, her tiny hands curling against Josie's shoulder as sleep claimed her. In her peaceful face, Josie could sometimes see echoes of Thomas in the shape of her brow, the determined set of her chin. Yet she was also uniquely herself, a new soul carrying forward the legacy of those who had come before. As darkness fell completely, and the family moved inside, a gentle breeze stirred the wind chimes Colt had hung from the porch. Roof chimes crafted from pieces of metal, salvaged from both Thomas's St. Louis apartment and Sarah's ranch kitchen. Their mingled tones followed the family inside, a harmonious reminder that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from fragments that once seemed irreparably broken. In the nursery, as Josie laid baby Sarah in her cradle, she whispered the same prayer she had spoken every night since the child's birth. "May you grow in wisdom and courage. May you know justice and practice mercy. May you always remember those who sacrificed so you could thrive." And somewhere beyond the boundaries of the visible world, two souls who had never met in life stood watch together over the family. Their love had created a final prayer. answered a circle completed, a future secured through the precious alchemy of sacrifice transformed into hope.